What's going on, guys? Josh from soccerreviewsforyou.com bringing you another Q&A video. I'm not sure what episode we're on now, not that it really matters, but I'm here to answer your questions. And as with all the Q&A videos, if you guys would like to ask questions for the next one, the place where I pull the questions from is on my Instagram, which is SR4U_Josh. It'll be linked down below in the description. You'll see my Instagram name on screen as well. Go and follow me there if you don't already, if you want to participate in future Q&As. You may have also noticed that my setup for this video is a little bit different than normal, and that's because I'm actually using the Boot Nerds podcast setup. If you didn't know, I started a brand new podcast with J Mike from Unisport, where, as the name would suggest, we talk about everything football boot related, new boots, old boots, comparisons, and we also answer a lot of your boot related questions in podcast form. There's a Boot Nerds YouTube channel. I'll leave a little pop-up on screen. It'll take you directly there. Subscribe if you haven't already. And there are also audio only versions of all the podcasts on the Boot Nerds website, which is cleverly named bootnerds.com. That will also be linked down below in the description. So if you're not following Boot Nerds, go ahead and check it out. With that said, if you guys enjoy the Q&A series on this channel and want to see it continue, please support this video with a like. And with all that out of the way, let's get right into your questions. Josh_Wanamook asks, best looking Mercurial. This is a question that I really didn't have to think about that much, but I am curious to hear your answers to what you think are the best looking Mercurials ever. So leave those down below in the comments. Either way, I think there's only one answer, and it is the Nike Mercurial Vapor 3. Clearly, the best looking Mercurial ever. The Classic Gentleman asks, any tips for an aspiring striker? For those that don't know, my preferred position is actually as a striker. I've played that position probably for about 10 years now, and a lot of people don't know this either, but I've done a lot of coaching at the youth level, so teaching kids not just how to play as a striker, but how to play in general. And the striker position amongst kids is typically the most popular one because everybody wants to score goals. And I also think it has this view where it's the easiest position to play, mainly because you're just trying to score goals. You don't have too much in the way of defensive responsibilities. And again, everyone wants to be the hero. But what I think is the most common mistake, and what I find is difficult to teach a lot of kids when it comes to playing the striker position, is that it's just as important to come to the ball as it is to run away from the ball. I think if you look at how people play the FIFA video game as an example, they do this long build up, get to the midfield, and then immediately they're spamming the through ball button to try and put a through ball to the striker who's really fast, get a breakaway, and score. That is typically the easiest way to score, not just in a video game, but I would say in real life as well. And there's a time and place for that. But trying to do that every single time, constantly running away from the ball, while you might score goals, perhaps even in every match, depending on how good the opposition is, once you get to a certain level, that just doesn't cut it. So the ability to come to the ball, hold up the play a little bit, give the rest of your team time to move up the field while they've advanced the ball to you, and really just being that extra option period, even if it's just for the sake of maintaining possession, is super important as a striker. And I think the one thing, especially at the youth level, that's very difficult to teach, because again, instinctively as a striker, you want to constantly run towards the goal, which means you are running away from your teammates. And that, in my opinion, again, time and place for it, but the ability to come to the ball and hold up the play a little bit and really having an idea of what's behind you is extremely important. And I think if you can learn to do that effectively, you'll be a much better striker. Brecken29 asks, what is the best boot for a keeper? Longtime viewers of this channel know that I'm not a huge fan of boots by position. It exists mainly as a suggestion for the sake of marketing, but a lot of people view boots by position as this kind of football boot law that must be followed in order to perform at the highest level, meaning that if you're a winger and you're not wearing Mercurials, you're doing yourself a disservice and your performance is suffering because of it. That is obviously not true. I'm of the opinion that you need to pick your boots based on what you like the fit and feel of. And if you happen to be a winger and you like wearing Copa Mundials, absolutely nothing wrong with that. When it comes to goalkeepers specifically, I'm kind of the same mindset, but at the same time, it's such a specialized position in comparison to what everyone else is doing out on the field that I can understand why you might think that certain boots might be better suited for a goalkeeper than others. And I can tell you, I guess the way I want to answer this question is there are two things that if I were a goalkeeper, I would prioritize in my football boots. And that is one, aggressive traction. I would want as much grip as possible for the sake of pushing off and diving. So something with a bladed stud pattern, I think would be what I would gravitate towards. And then the second thing that I would really want to make sure is that I had a pair of boots that I felt I could kick the ball a long distance comfortably and consistently. So whether that's something with a little bit more of a padded upper or a thinner upper, again, personal preference is going to play a part here. Those are the two things that I would really focus on if you're picking new boots as a goalkeeper. Again, at the end of the day, it depends on what you like, and everyone likes something a little bit different. So if you were hoping the answer to this question is this one boot is the best for goalkeepers, unfortunately, that one boot doesn't exist. Grayson Smalley asks, what would you say your favorite style of boots are? Leather, more agile boots, control boots, etc. When power boots were a thing, that's something that I really gravitated towards. Back when the Predators were still Predators, when the Nike T90 series was around, even the early days of the Mizuno Wave Ignitus, I was a big fan of all of those boots. Leather uppers with the rubberized striking elements, that was the thing that I really liked. Obviously, that's not really a thing anymore in modern football boots. So now what I tend to gravitate towards is boots that have soft kangaroo leather uppers. But at the same time, I think the knitted upper side of football boots has really evolved a lot in the last 5 years. So there are plenty of knitted boots that I would be happy to wear as well. I would say in general, in comparison to 10 years ago, almost everything that comes out in terms of high-end product is really, really good. Are there some that I prefer over others? Absolutely. But I can't say that there's one particular material or one particular style of boot that I always like over everything else. I think there's lots of good boots, lots of good variety out there. So hard for me to say that one thing in particular is my favorite. Luke Andrus asks, if you could bring back one cleat from your childhood, what would it be? My answer to this question is maybe kind of a weird one, but there is one boot in particular that I am personally very fond of from my childhood, and that is the Nike T90 Laser 2. Looking back, it's a flawed boot in a lot of ways. It's a clunky design, it's bulky, it's heavy. It doesn't really have a lot going for it in comparison to what we have right now. If you're talking about objective elements in regards to how the boots fit, feel, and perform. But I just really like the way that those boots felt. I really like the way that they look. It's something that I would personally like to see back. Would it be a good decision for Nike to do that? Probably not. But I also really like the T90 Laser 3, which again is a very bulky, clunky boot by today's standards. So those are the two that I would like to see back. Whether or not that's a good idea remains to be seen. SH33SH1N, favorite cushion in sneakers: Boost, Bounce, Zoom, Air, Air Max, React, Zoom X, Lunarlon, Light Strike, 4D. He named them all. My answer to this question depends on what I'm going to be doing. If I'm actually going to be running a long distance, the simpler the better for me. I like running shoes that are not too heavily cushioned. I kind of like a slightly firmer feel, and I like the cushion setup for the most part to be relatively low profile. I don't like having a lot under my feet. A closer to barefoot experience is kind of what I'm looking for in a running shoe. So whether that's Lunarlon or React foam or any kind of foam that New Balance or Saucony or any random running shoe company has. Mizuno is something that I ran a lot in as well. I'm really happy with those. When it comes to casual wear and just general comfort for walking around all day, I don't think you can beat Boost from Adidas. That to me is just super comfortable. But from a visual aspect, I'm a big fan of any of the Air Max stuff from Nike. The Vapor Max series, I think is just really cool. I love the way that Vapor Max sole looks. It's not necessarily the most comfortable. I don't think they're really good for running at all, but it looks really cool. Even that new Air Max 720 thing that I think they just showed, at least that's what I think it's called. I really think they look cool. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be made for running or if it's just for casual wear, but I love the way that it looks. So I'm not too picky when it comes to, I guess, sneaker cushioning technology. I'm a fan of pretty much all of it, but when it comes to actually running, I tend to kind of gravitate towards more simple setups. Ben Ayi asks, how long have you been collecting boots? Obviously, I have a lot of boots in my collection, and I think a lot of people automatically assume that I am a lifelong football boot collector. That's not actually the case at all. As a kid, if I had boots, I was wearing them until they were unwearable. So I didn't do any collecting as a kid whatsoever. It wasn't until I started this YouTube channel where basically the idea behind it at the start was that I needed something to give myself an excuse to buy as many football boots as I could possibly afford. So while working at a football boot store, any money that I made, I would spend at said store to buy football boots to review for you guys on YouTube. And luckily, it grew into something much bigger than I ever could have hoped for. But a lot of those early day boots that I tested on the channel, I ended up selling to fund buying more boots to review on the channel. So it wasn't until I would say maybe a year or two into doing the whole YouTube thing that I actually started collecting football boots, period. So I've really only been collecting boots maybe for 5 or 6 years now. It's crazy to think that they've accumulated that fast, but yeah, 5 or 6 years. Roger14 asks, Jordan, what could be worse than burns from artificial ground? No question that turf burn sucks, but I would honestly rather have turf burn than blisters. Playing with blisters, especially when they're on your heel, is probably one of the worst things ever. Also, black toenails. That to me is probably the worst thing you can experience as far as like minor injuries go. And for those that don't know what I'm talking about, if you get stepped on hard enough on your toe, any nail, even if it's on your hand, it'll turn black. Basically, it bleeds underneath, and there's an immense amount of pressure pressing that nail basically away from your toe. It feels terrible, and the only way to relieve that pressure is to basically drill a hole in the nail so the blood can flow out. And typically at that point, if that happens, the nail ends up dying. I'm not exactly sure why that is. It falls off, and it takes about 6 to 9 months for the nail to grow back completely. And at that point, it's kind of compromised, and you are much more likely to suffer the same injury again. I've had this happen to me probably 5 or 6 times in my lifetime. It is the worst thing ever, every single time it happens. And I would much rather have turf burns instead. Tristan9 asks, would you like to see a hype brand like Supreme or Bape collab on a soccer cleat? This is something that I think we're going to see more and more of, because it seems to be a really good way for these companies to drive a lot of hype to the brand and to a particular product. We saw a little bit of this with Nike and the Mercurial Vapor 12 off-whites that they did going back, 6 or 7 months now. Those did pretty well. I know not everyone was a huge fan of how they ended up looking, but they sold out pretty much instantly. So for the most part, I'd say that was a success. We're seeing a lot of this from Nike. We've seen, I believe, a Bape collaboration with Puma in the past. I could be wrong about that. And in general, I think we're just going to see more of this moving forward. Is it something that I personally get excited about, though? Not really. I'm not really into these hype brands that a lot of people are into, but at the same time, I'm all for cool collaborations. I'm all for cool designs and colorways, and more likely than not, I'd probably end up buying any of these if they were to come out. So I'm not against it, but it's not something that I am on the edge of my seat waiting for. PF_M10 asks, what is the best way to clean Flyknit models? Because once they get dirty, that material is literally stained and dirty for good. I mean, you more or less answered your own question there. A stain is basically a dirty spot that is permanent. You can't get it out. That's why it's called a stain. So if you have a stain on your knitted boots, basically like a stain on your socks, can't get the stain out of your socks, you're not going to be able to get the stain out of your knitted boots that are made out of the same material as your socks. So unfortunately, if you buy knitted boots and they get a stain, they're stained. J-Dubs asks, with increasing popularity of boots with knitted and plastic uppers, will leather shoes ever diminish in the market? I think it's fair to say that they already are. If you look at every single line of boots, the leather option tends to be the least popular in pretty much every single brand, at least the major ones. Right now, as great as the Tiempo Legend 7 Elite is, it's probably the least popular line from Nike. If you look at Adidas, yes, they just came out with the new Copa. That is a kangaroo leather upper and interesting in its own way. It's actually pretty unique. I still don't think that that's a boot that long-term kids are going to gravitate towards. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize about the football boot industry. While us as enthusiasts might really like kangaroo leather uppers, kids typically don't want that. They don't care about the natural leather. They're into the synthetics. They're into the knitted uppers. They're into the more modern stuff. So companies, unsurprisingly, kind of gravitate towards doing more of those rather than making more leather boots. There was a time when leather was the best material you could get on a football boot because synthetic technology just wasn't there. It's hard to say that that's the case anymore. So I think it's pretty much inevitable that leather boots will slowly, more or less, disappear, unfortunately. Cole Eras 10 asks, hey Jonathan, whatever happened to the Warrior brand? Are they still around and I just don't know, or did they quit making soccer football products? Warrior is still around, except it's called New Balance now. In fact, it was actually New Balance from the very beginning because the Warrior brand was owned owned by the New Balance brand. So basically, when they tried to enter the market as Warrior, they did so thinking that the Warrior brand would maybe be a little bit cooler, a little bit more unique, and possibly break into the market a little bit more easily. But I think when they realized that nobody was accepting Warrior as a legitimate football/soccer brand, they rebranded it to New Balance, which I think a lot of people are more familiar with. And that's basically how it went. The Warrior brand launched, and then they continued it on as New Balance. It's always been one brand. They basically just changed the name. And that's pretty much it for this Q&A, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please support it with a like. And again, if you want to ask questions for the next Q&A episode, you have to go on my Instagram, SR4U_Josh. Before I make my next Q&A, I will make a video on Instagram asking you guys to ask me questions, and I'll pull the best ones from there. SR4U_Josh. Go follow me there if you don't already. As always, if you have any questions regarding anything that I discussed in today's video, leave it down below in the comments, and I'll do my best to get an answer out to you as soon as I possibly can. Subscribe if you haven't already for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear, and be sure to hit that notification bell so you get notified when the next new video goes live. All my social media information is linked down below in the description as well, so follow me there if you don't already. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.